Good evening, dear traveler. Tonight, we gather in the stillness of winter's embrace, where shadows dance and mysteries linger in the frost-kissed air. As the world rests beneath a blanket of snow, allow me to offer a toast to the night's tale, a story that will remind us that even the warm glow of Christmas lights can cast the darkest shadows. Tonight, sip slowly, for this is the Christmas Reaper tonight's drink, a mocktail I call Silent Night, a rich blend of tart berries and aromatic spices crowned with the shimmer of winter's magic. Each sip carries you deeper into the story, an ode to the shadows and light of the season. The Christmas Reaper. It was Christmas Eve. The world was dusted with a thick layer of snow, the air crisp and cold, carrying the faint scent of pine and the distant sound of jingling bells. Santa Claus, the jolly old man who had become the very embodiment of Christmas, sat alone in his study, his fingers brushing over a vast scroll, the naughty list. He had been here before, year after year, reading over the names, checking them twice. But this year was different. This year, the list was longer than it had ever been. A sigh escaped his lips as he looked at the countless names written in bold, dark ink. His once merry face was now drawn with sorrow. He had witnessed the slow decay of innocence, the gradual hardening of hearts. The world had changed, and not for the better. Children who once eagerly awaited the arrival of Christmas now only thought of themselves. Greed, cruelty, selfishness, the qualities that had once been only whispers in the dark, now shouted loudly from every corner. The joy of giving had become the desire for more, and the spirit of Christmas, the one thing that had always held the world together, was now just another holiday to buy and sell. Santa's eyes lingered on the list, his fingers brushing over the names of children he had once delivered presents to with joy, children whose laughter had once filled the halls of his workshop. But those days felt like a distant memory now. The innocence had been replaced with something darker, something far more troubling. He had watched it happen slowly, like a creeping winter storm that no one could stop. As he reached the final line on the scroll, he looked up, his gaze distant and unfocused. He had done everything he could. He had given them the gifts. He had reminded them of the joy in giving, the magic of Christmas. But it was never enough. There was no magic left in the world, not the way there had been when he first started this work centuries ago. What once was a season of love and goodwill now felt like a fading dream. His heart, once warm and full of cheer, now felt cold, cold and heavy with the weight of his task. His shoulders sagged under the burden of it all. Perhaps it's time to let go, Santa muttered to himself, his breath visible in the frigid air as he stared at the list one last time. Perhaps it's time to do what must be done. He stood up from his chair and walked over to the fireplace, the flickering flames casting an eerie glow on his tired face. He reached into the flames, pulling out a small bell that had been passed down through the ages. The bell held the power to call upon an entity as old as time itself. An entity whose very presence struck terror into the hearts of those who truly understood its purpose. With a steady hand, Santa rang the bell. It echoed through the halls of the North Pole, carrying with it the cold finality of what was to come. A chill filled the room. The air grew heavier, colder, and in the corner of the study, a shadow began to take shape. The Reaper had arrived. Santa did not flinch, nor did he speak. He simply turned to face the figure that had appeared before him, cloaked in darkness, its form barely discernible from the shadows. The Reaper stood still, its cold, hollow eyes focused on Santa. The creature was an embodiment of death itself, tall and imposing, with skin as black as the void and hair that seemed to writhe and slither like smoke. It wore a cloak made of night, its edges trailing off into an abyss that seemed to swallow light. The only sound that accompanied its arrival was the faint whisper of the wind, as though the very atmosphere bowed in deference to its presence. Santa did not speak. There was no need. The Reaper knew what had to be done. With a swift motion, the Reaper extended its long, bony fingers and took the scroll from Santa's hands. The cold that emanated from its touch made Santa shiver. The Reaper unfurled the list, reading over the names with a detached, almost amused expression. So many. The Reaper's voice rasped, its tone like the creaking of ancient wood. So many who have lost their way. So many who have forgotten the meaning of Christmas. Santa nodded solemnly, his eyes lowered. I cannot continue to give to them. They don't care about the magic anymore. They've turned it into something twisted. The Reaper's cold eyes flicked up to meet Santa's. Then it is time for them to be forgotten. Santa winced at the words. He had heard of the Reaper's methods before, and they were not something to be taken lightly. The Reaper did not kill in the traditional sense. No, its work was far crueler. It erased existence itself, leaving nothing but a hollow, unfeeling void behind. The souls of the guilty would be taken to a place beyond time, a world where they could do nothing but watch as their absence was felt by everyone they had ever known. And the most agonizing part was that the ones they loved, the parents, the friends, the siblings, would forget them, erased from memory, gone without a trace. Will they suffer? Santa asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Reaper tilted its head slightly, a smile twisting across its dark face. Their suffering will be eternal, but it will not be in the way you think. They will not feel the sting of death. No, they will feel the terror of being forgotten. He had hoped, somehow, that things would change, that children would return to the true meaning of Christmas. But he had seen enough to know that hope alone was not enough. It was time to take action. The Reaper took the list, each name a soul doomed to vanish from the world. It stood motionless for a moment, its cold gaze scanning the names before it whispered, "They will learn what it means to be truly alone." With a snap of its fingers, the Reaper vanished from the room, taking the list with it. Santa stood alone, the silence of the North Pole filling the space around him. In the dark, distant corners of the world, the Reaper began its work. The streets were empty, save for a few stray dogs sniffing through piles of snow. It moved like a shadow through the homes, its long cloak sweeping over doorways and through windows. In each house it visited, it took the souls of the children who had been lost to greed and malice. The souls did not fight. They could not fight. They were dragged from their homes, their lives, without so much as a scream. The Reaper's touch was cold, final, and irreversible. But what happened next was far more terrifying than death itself. The Reaper led the souls to a chamber, an otherworldly void where the darkness stretched out in every direction. The only light came from the monitors that flickered to life, casting a sickly glow over the room. The souls of the children floated in the air, suspended in this eerie place, unable to move or speak. They could only watch. On the monitors, images of their former homes flickered to life. Their bedrooms, once filled with toys and laughter, now stood empty. Not a single trace of their existence remained. The walls were bare, the beds untouched. The rooms were as if frozen in time, but there was something wrong about them. Something that sent a chill through the souls of the children who had once lived there. The next screen showed their parents, their faces a blur of indifference as they went about their lives. In one home, a mother woke up to find the space beside her empty. She didn't seem to care. She went about her day without a second thought. The father of another child looked into an empty crib. The souls in the void could feel the absence. They could feel the emptiness where once there had been love, once there had been life. And then the Reaper spoke, its voice a raspy whisper that echoed through the darkness. Do you see? Do you see what you have become? Forgotten, erased, nothing more than a fleeting shadow in a world that no longer remembers you. The souls trembled, their eyes wide with terror. They could feel the weight of the Reaper's words pressing down on them like a 1,000-ton weight. Your parents? Your friends? They do not remember you. They never will. You no longer exist in their world. You are a memory wiped clean from the face of time. The Reaper's laughter rang through the chamber, dark and hollow. It was not the laughter of joy, but of cruel satisfaction. Now you will watch. Watch as they go on with their lives, as if you never mattered, as if you were never there. With that, the monitors flickered off, leaving the souls alone in the pitch-black void, their fate sealed. Back at the North Pole, Santa stood before his fireplace, the last embers of the fire flickering as he watched the snow fall gently outside. His heart was still heavy, but he knew the world was a little bit better tonight. The Reaper had done what needed to be done. The souls of the wicked children were gone erased from existence, and though it was a cruel fate, it was the only way to restore balance to the world. Santa closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the silence of the night to wash over him. He knew that as long as there were still a few children left who believed, who still held the true spirit of Christmas in their hearts, there was still hope. But for now, there was only the darkness of the world and the quiet solitude of a task completed. And so, as the snow continued to fall outside, Santa Claus, the jolly old man who had once filled the world with magic, turned away from his study and disappeared into the depths of the North Pole, leaving behind the sound of bells and the memory of a time when Christmas truly meant something. Somewhere, deep in the darkness, the Reaper's cold laugh echoed in the distance, and all that remained was the silence of the forgotten. And so, the tale fades into shadow, much like the Reaper's passing whisper. May your nights be still, your hearts unburdened, and your secrets safe for now. Until we meet again, in the flicker of a candle or the chill of a winter's breath. Good night, my dear guests. Sleep soundly, if you dare.